The Electoral Commission of South Africa is today presenting its official report on the 2024 general elections to Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs. The presentation covered key aspects of the electoral process, including voter turnout, logistical performance, election integrity, and any legal challenges or disputes arising from the polls. The report was also expected to reflect on lessons learned and recommendations for future electoral reforms. It marks a critical moment for post-election accountability and transparency, especially following one of South Africa's most closely contested national elections in recent history. Independent elections analyst Michael Atkins joins us now to discuss this report. A very good afternoon to you, Michael. Thanks very much for your time. Well, the IEC reckons that all things considered, they did a pretty good job in managing last year's elections.
Good afternoon. Yes. Look, certainly the IEC had a lot to deal with changes to the law, certainly some challenges from political parties in the legal sphere. And I think the report shows us the vast scale of the logistical task that is involved in managing an election. But I have some concerns more about what the report doesn't say. I think a lot of people did experience problems. There was a lot of talk about long queues in last year's election. And the report mentions those, but my concern is that it's not fully getting to grips with the length of those queues and exactly how that played out. So I think it would be good for this to be interrogated more so that we do have a clearer picture.
We do, of course, have at least one party. It's been saying since then, since the outcome of the election was declared, that the elections were rigged, they were robbed, but of course they have failed dismally, one should say up until now at least, to actually prove that. But they say they still are going to ventilate this matter in the courts. But one of the things that they have, or incidences that they've pointed to, was that incident where the screen went blank. No one knew what was going on. Of course, the IEC was quick to say that nothing untoward actually happened there, but that remains one of those episodes that those who are unconvinced that the IEC should pat itself in the back, usually or have often pointed to.
You know, the report, that is actually one area where the report deals extremely well. A problem occurred. In some ways, it's unfortunate. It was a visible problem. Everybody could see. We all were waiting. But the report is very candid on that. It explains very clearly why it happened. It was actually a very small IT slip. The changes that they made to their updating system were perfectly reasonable. And in that process, somebody made a very tiny error, but for perfectly clear reasons that are explained fully in the report, it took some time to be able to get everything back up to the normal display. And from the report, it is very clear that there is nothing sinister in the delay. And that is one of the things that I think the report does extremely well, is put to rest any suspicions that could have arisen around that particular incident.
Of course, I mean, one of the issues is turnout, which has been concerning to many people. But of course, the IEC has repeatedly pointed out that it's not really something that is in their hands. In many ways, they are actually beneficiaries, or this is a product of the or an outcome of the political system. In other words, when people are less interested or are not so keen to actually go out there and vote, that is not something you can blame them for.
You know, there is a different viewpoint on that. That is correct in as far as it goes. But there is another perspective on that. In the Portfolio Committee, when the Commission reported on the local government election to the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee in 2022, the question was raised about some of the problems that those voter management devices had in the local government election. And the question was posed to the Commission in that Portfolio Committee meeting as to whether the problems with the tablets had any impact on voter turnout. And the mechanism would be simple. If people drive past a voting station and they see long queues, then they might say to themselves, oh, well, I'm not going to vote. Or if one family member goes in the morning and waits 2.5 hours, and we've heard many such stories, then other family members might decide later in the day that it's not worth their while. Now, the simple fact is we do not know whether the longer queues had any impact on the voter turnout. For me, that was one of the big questions that I was hoping this report would address. And I have to say I'm disappointed. The report did not publish the average queue waiting time. In past elections and in past reports from the HSRC surveys conducted at 300 voting stations after the election, the waiting times, like in 2011, it was 23 minutes. All the other elections after that, it was around 16 minutes average waiting time. But there's no information in this report as to what the average waiting time was or how that spread worked. So unfortunately, that leaves a big question unanswered at this point.
But is it not partly a problem of resources, Michael, in that perhaps they are unable to have more voting stations in the same way that they have been unable to do as much voter education as they would want to do?
Look, the question of resources is very important. I will say the Commission has done extremely well with the resources they have. A lot of commentators are talking about the budget constraints and how over recent years the Commission has had to make do with like no increases to their budgets and trimming some of the projections. But the number of voting stations has steadily increased over the years. And while some may talk about the voter education and any limitations there, I think most people agree that the Commission has done extremely well with the resources they have. So no, I wouldn't say that the number of voting stations is a factor in that queue. It is speculation at this point as to whether the problems with the voter management devices caused the slow queues and whether the slow queues had any statistical impact on the voter turnout. We simply do not know. And in my view, we ought to be finding that out.
Michael Atkins, as always, let me thank you for your time and insights. Really appreciate it. In a moment, we're going to bring you the day's business news.